Sitting here at Fresno City College, and I have the honor tonight of introducing our guests. But first, I want to give some sort of general welcome, some thank yous. First of all, to you for coming here. Thanks so much for coming. I never thought we'd be treating a live event as some kind of novel new thing, but we're all human beings and not little rectangles in Zoom meeting things. That's really wonderful. A living, breathing, tremendous event. So I'd like to thank several folks before we get started. First, as always, thanks to Fresno City College for hosting. I'm always amazed when we're in this building and thinking that it is all smart now. It's just wonderful every time we're here. So that's number one. Number two, thanks to the Fresno City College Campus Community Colloquium for sponsoring the event tonight. The colloquium is a group of faculty members who put on speakers and occasional panel discussions about timely topics. And so this is the first one we've hosted since before COVID, since basically November 2019. So it's wonderful to be back, and it's great to have such an illustrious person as our first return here. Second, I think, actually, I should also name some of those folks. That's Anthony Shock, who teaches journalism here, Michaela Stair, who teaches history, Nick Hernandez, we're all part of that colloquium. Next, I'd like to thank the College Allied Staff and Faculty Association for their support of this event. I saw Aaron and Mom, there we are. Yeah, the Allied Staff and Faculty Association for Fresno City College. Also, this is a collaboration with folks out of Fresno State as well. Kevin Fuller from the Women's Gender and Sexuality Studies program who worked with us on this, and thanks to the Fresno State LGBT plus Allies Network for their support. And finally, one last mention. The book. This is loud, right? Oh, okay. All right. Well, I think we're okay. All right. Just wanted to. One last mention, though, is Nick Lucio, who longtime colleague and interim director of college relations and outreach here at Fresno City College. He's the person who first brought Nicole to my attention, and to the attention of the colloquium to bring here. Nick has long been involved with the important Imperial Court here in Fresno, and he thought it was high time that we invited our guest tonight. Sadly, though, Nick is ill and can't be here. That's why I'm standing in front of you. Not that it's a problem, obviously, it's great, but I wanted to offer my thanks to him as well. So tonight's event is going to be a talk, and then hopefully we can have some question and answer. A little bit of that after Nicole delivers this talk here. And that brings us to our guest of honor. City and County Commissioner Nicole Ramirez has been a Latino and LGBTQ activist for over 50 years, having worked with Cesar Chavez, Harvey Milk, among others. He has served on the national boards of the Human Rights Campaign, the National LGBTQ Task Force, and is a past president of Equality California. He's been elected to the National Executive Committee of all 5 LGBTQ marches in Washington, having served as national chair of 3 marches. Nicole has served and advised the last 8 mayors of San Diego, and is titular head of the Imperial Court System, founded in 1965, with now 70 chapters in cities throughout the USA, Canada, and Mexico. And the title and position as Queen Mother of the Americas. There's a documentary film right here that's in the works to be released in 2023. So, with that introduction, please join me in welcoming Nicole Ramirez.
Good evening, Buenos Aires. As we have gathered here this evening, let us remember and never forget on this very night, 23 years ago, Matthew Shepard was tied to a fence in the freezing Wyoming prairie and pistol whipped over 20 times, so hard that his head was nearly crushed in. He was left to die, and when he was discovered, the police officer said his tears had become frozen in the night. Let us never forget Matthew Shepard, and let's have a moment of silence in his memory. In the last 5 years, hate crimes against Jewish community, African American, Asian Pacific Islander, Latino LGBTQ, especially trans women of color, the undocumented, have skyrocketed across the United States. Sadly, racism, homophobia, anti-Semitism has become more visible, and hate groups and organizations have actually doubled in size. Yes, I think we live in very difficult and challenging times. But I stand before you as an activist who has witnessed the growth, the visibility, and empowerment of the two communities I truly love for the last over 50 years of activism, the Latino and LGBT communities. As I've said so many times before, a community, indeed a movement, that does not know where it came from and whose shoulders it stands on does not really know where it's going. We must learn from the Native American, First Nation people who preserve their history by storytelling from generation to generation. I come from the 1950s and 60s, from a childhood and schools where I was not only taught a wetback, a beaner, greaser, spit, but queer and faggot. I come from a time that people of color, black or brown, could not marry a white Caucasian person, even in the state of California. I come from a time that farm workers in California, right here in Fresno, were treated like slaves and worked the fields for dollars a day. I come from a time that homosexuals were considered and labeled as deviants, perverts, and with just a stroke of a pen, of a signature of your parents or a judge, homosexuals were committed to state hospitals and subjected to electric shock treatment in the hospitals, just because they chose to love someone of the same sex. I had many friends that were subjected to these hospitals, never to return the same. Think about it. Homosexuality in California was not legalized until 1976. This is the time I come from, and many of the LGBTQ elders do also. My father was very involved in the American GI Forum, which was the first Latino American organization in the United States. I come from a very strict Latino family. I'm sure many of you do. My parents were very Catholic, and my father pushed me, and my activism I do owe it to him, because every night when my 12 o'clock read the newspaper and give a report on Time magazine. My mother made sure I became an altar boy, and I was pushed by both of them. My father said, "You know, I want you to become a congressman." Notice, not a councilman, not a supervisor, a congressman. My mother wanted to become a cardinal, not a monk, not a nun, but a cardinal. One day I called my mom and I said, "Well, Dad, I'm not going to be a congressman. Mom, I'm not going to be a cardinal. I'm a queen." It didn't go over too well. But he used to say my entire family rejected me because they learned that I was homosexual. I was very close to my grandparents And I was not allowed to the funeral because in their minds, homosexuality was certainly against God and the Bible. So I fled to Hollywood in the 1960s, and the 60s were definitely sex, rock and roll, and drugs. And unlike Clinton, I certainly didn't hell. I became a street king because it's interesting, some of my psychiatrists told me much decades later that I felt this is how religious Catholic was. I felt that if I had a sex change and became a woman, that God would love me and accept me because He would not accept me as a homosexual. So I lived this way for 5 years. Thank God, finally one of my doctor friends said, "Nicole, you're not really transsexual. You're just a homosexual that likes to dress up." So, in many ways, it probably saved my life because I probably would have went through the operation. While in Hollywood, I met Reverend Troy Berry, who was the founder of the Metropolitan Community Church, Morris Ryder, founder of the Gay Center in Los Angeles, Robin Tyler, and so many others. And because of my youth and background in school and running for office and so forth, I became an activist in Los Angeles. And at times I would fly to San Francisco. And one night, I'll never forget, I walked into a bar and I'm just there having a good old time. And all of a sudden, everyone goes, "The Empress is here, the Empress." And I see this little Mexican queen. Well, what's so special about her? She's the Empress. And what's Jose? Jose Luis there was a World War II veteran. And can you imagine? In 1961, she became the first openly gay candidate to run for public office. A proud World War II veteran, a drag queen, a very proud Latina. And he almost won. When he filed, there were 9 seats. And right the day before he filed, the Democratic Party, there ended up 31 people filed because they realized that there could be a homosexual constituency. And so when the election came, I think he came in around 11. From that day on, there was definitely gay power in San Francisco. The police chief, the mayor, soon asked to meet with Jose. And that is truly when gay political power began in San Francisco. But think about it. Hardly anyone knows about Jose. Hardly anyone knows because in assimilating in many of our LGBTQ, it is very difficult at times. And I don't understand why for the people except I've done a lot of that to educate people about who Jose was. And finally, he's been recognized. He's been to films on him. I worked with Supervisor Ben. The first street named after an opening gay citizen was for Jose. So in meeting Jose, one day I was with him in San Francisco at a bar, and in walks this crazy dude. And I go, "Who's that?" I go, "About that. His name's Harvey. He's been running for supervisor." And I go, "Well, she better cut her hair because he better get elected." And so Jose introduced me to Harvey. And Harvey was kind of, I would say, surprised because we being a drag queen and so forth, that we could talk hardcore politics. Everything from Nixon and Eisenhower to Barry Goldwater. It's interesting to know that Harvey was actually a Republican in New York, where he came from, and was a strong supporter of Barry Goldwater. But the end of Barry Goldwater was considered a very conservative senator. His grandson came out this way, and he supported gays in the military and equal rights in his last years. During that time, Anita Bryant came out. Now, Anita Bryant, she was first runner of Miss America, that was her claim to fame, and she was in Florida, and she launched this Save Our Children crusade. Well, she's still alive, but I ever waited on to give her a present birth. And I'm going to tell you why. She awoken a sleeping giant. Our community was under attack, and there was referendums from city to city and state all across the United States, and they passed, and they were discrimination against homosexuals, and she was on a ride. But our community stood up and started organizing, because we realized we had to fight. And an interesting note to that is that she boasted when she came to Arizona, when we were speaking here, she was getting close, she said that it was Tucson, Arizona, 16,000 seat convention center. And she said, I will fill that, and when I fill it, my next stop is California. Well, Tucson, Arizona in the 1970s was not exactly a place where LGBT people were out of the closet. So I got a call, and two others, Troy Perry and Mark Scott, and they flew us in to speak at a human rights rally right outside the auditorium. And I'll never forget, because all these little nicely dressed Christians started throwing oranges at us. And what I also remember is after my speech, there was a lot of national coverage, because if she filled this auditorium, the good news is there was only 5,000 people in the auditorium that showed up, and 1,000 showed up outside of the auditorium. So it was quite a victory. But when I got home, it had been received local coverage reports, and a week later, my apartment college got fired off. And I'll never forget that police actually came to my house a week later and said, oh, we know who did it, because the American Nazi Party actually had orders for some Colorado. We lived in the city outside of San Diego. And they said, oh, the American Nazis did it, so you should move out of town. So I go, well, whatever, you know who did it? They go, yeah, but you should move out of town. Because by then I was living in the police station and the office and so forth, so they thought I was kind of crazy and they would like to see me. But I was in San Diego in the 1970s, very conservative town. I remember you could not see one black officer, maybe one, maybe a couple of female police officers, mostly Caucasian. And just as they would raid our bars, they definitely raided the barrio, the African American neighborhoods. It was, we called it, they said, was the stop. It was this environment that I definitely realized that I had to become more of an activist, because San Diego's at that time community was totally. I'll never forget that there were pride parades in Los Angeles and New York and everywhere. So myself and God bless them both, they passed their age, Tom Holman, an ACLU attorney, and Jess Jessup, a Vietnam vet, and I went to the police station to get a permit for our first parade. And they said, are you crazy? Now remember, this is 1974, so it's still against the law. So he said, unless you get out, we're going to arrest you for being devious. And then the last thing I remember, and I always feel, there will never be a pride parade in San Diego. Well, now there are a quarter of a million people that attend our parade, and it's the biggest parade out in the St. Patrick's Day parade, the Italian parade. So I always think of those two, because if they could see what they helped start and what it's become, I know that they would be quite happy. In 1979 was the first March on Washington. And how that happened was that Harvey Milk had talked about going to Washington and marching. And when he got assassinated, we all said, then we're going to march on Washington. And we marched in 1979. And as I said, though California in 1976, it was made legal homosexual acts, you can well imagine the other states. So homosexuality was quite illegal around the country. New York and California were the first to legalize legalize homosexuality. So there were 5 marches on Washington. The first one in 1979 brought about 100,000 people, and that was huge if you think about it. Mostly coming from states where it was illegal for them to be homosexual. The biggest march was in 1987. And why was that big? The biggest march because we were fighting for our lives. AIDS was there. That was when the AIDS quilt was rolled out on the Capitol. Many beautiful pictures of that. I got to meet Brian Russell, and Brian Russell was, and he's another interesting character as Jose. Thank God, actually, the Obamas are financing a documentary, finding a major picture on Brian Russell's life. He was an advisor and mentor to Martin Luther King. He was the executive director of the March on Washington, of Martin Luther King. And if you think about it, can you imagine he was an open, homosexual African American. Didn't hide it at all. And he spoke at the march, and as I said, was the executive director. Finally, people are beginning to recognize. Even in our own community, people still don't know about Jose or Byron. So I had the privilege of talking to him, but I didn't know who he was myself. And I thought, who's this really nice little African American man there? And he's very feeble and stuff. And we had a nice conversation. And then I found out, like I said, you know who you were talking to? So I really feel God's blessing to meet some of these people that definitely were shoulders we stand on. So I was on the executive committee, and we were talking about speakers. And I was noticing that all the speakers were kind of Caucasian. So I go, well, I always invite Charles. Here's Charles. And they go, okay, why? So I go, okay. So I had worked with them, and so I thought, ooh. But I called him. And I said, you know, Charles? Oh, hi, how are you? And I go, will you go to Washington and speak at a gay rights rally? And I heard in the background, are you crazy? You know, all these people say, are you nuts to go speak at a homosexual rally? And I heard that, and I went, oh, well. So I was ready, and he goes, of course I will come, my son. He said, they be arrangements. I was over the moon. I just couldn't believe it. And what I'll never forget, and we worked at different things and at different rallies, but on that one, what I'll never forget is that 800,000 people showed up because we were fighting for our rights. And on the front banner, we put the dignitaries and so forth. There was a senator, Jesse Jackson, and I love Jesse Jackson. But he came up to me and said, well, tell me where the parade's going to start and where is it going to end. And so, of course, all the cameras were at the beginning. And there he was, but he disappeared. Senor Chavez marched all the way. And he was counting. And then I said, oh, we have vehicles for, And he goes, no, I'm marching all the way. So I got to introduce him. And I'll never forget that when I introduced him, I said that was, boycott raising 800,000 people. And he wrote in his book, too, that it was the biggest rally an audience ever addressed, was the gay rights. And after being the queen that I am, I was in charge of the VIP tent. So I made sure more lobster rolls, and I was just looking forward to it. So after he spoke, I said, let me take you down to the VIP tent. And Senator Chavez goes, my son, I do not go to VIP tents. He goes, I want to go out to the people. I want to go because there were some New Mexico, Texas, and so forth. So, of course, I'm thinking lobster roll. So I went with it, but I think of him and Coretta Scott, other people that I've had the honor to get to meet and stuff, and when you're in front of greatness. And I have a healthy ego, I'm a queen. So they can humble you, just who they are. But what what they are, what they have become. And we spent 3 hours just fixing with the people. I don't know where he got this at, but he went and met with them and talked to people. And can you imagine we were LGBTQ and Latino and Latina, and there was Chavez right in front of you, taking the time to talk to you and that picture. So I will never forget that thing. So all the marches, I usually got elected to them because, and I would look around, and some of the marches, our national marches, were mostly Caucasian, and they were sensitive and allies, but I'd always go as the second march, and I go, well, where is our Asian Pacific Islander? Where is our Native American, and so forth? Because I believe when you're at the table, you should look and see who's missing from that table. And it was important to me to make sure that the representation of the people of color communities were on these marches, and they should be some of the speakers at these marches. So after the 90, it was the 94 march, I believe, you know, you spend 2 years working on these marches, you get worn out. So I go, oh God, I have a year to rest up for whatever else comes up. So I get a brochure, and in the brochure it said, come to New York for Stonewall 25, the anniversary of Stonewall riots. And there was a line that said, when the patriots fought back. And I thought, who in the hell are they talking about? Patriots. Now, first of all, I had the honor and pleasure of meeting Silver Rivera and spending some time with her. We talked about hormones and drugs, I recall. But we shared the streets life, and I thought, why have they said patrons? Why aren't they saying? Because in talking to her and others, you need to know that Stonewall riots were street people. They were lesbians. We lovingly call them bulldogs. In fact, Sylvia said that it wasn't for the lesbians pulling the queens out of the police vans, they would have been arrested and taken away. But if you see the history of Stonewall, you will see lesbians never mentioned. You will see drag queens. But the truth is, drag was illegal as it was in California. It was anti-cross dressing. And so Silver Rivera told me these stories, and I thought, why don't they say who the people were? Puerto Ricans, African Americans, and of course, obviously, it became a riot of everyone. But I called up the headquarters of Stonewall 25 and I said, why are you saying just patrons? Why don't you see who they were? And they said, wrong thing to say to a crazy Mexican queen like me. They said, well, if you don't like it, come to our next meeting in Denver, Colorado. So I went to the meeting in Denver, Colorado, and then they elected me a national chair. And so I wanted to make sure that the history of Sylvia and Marjorie Johnson and our lesbian sisters are told, and now it's beginning to be more said. I got involved in the Imperial Court system. The Imperial Courts, people go, what is the Imperial Court? The best way to describe them is they are gay, lesbian, Shriners, or Elks, or Mexico, except gallons and pounds. But you've got to remember that the Imperial Courts were established in 1965 in California. Remember, it wasn't until 1976 that it was legal. So what brave people these were to be involved in Jose. Now there are 70 chapters in the United States, Canada, and Mexico. 70 city chapters. They have raised millions and millions of dollars. And the most important thing is they welcome everyone. If you go to gay events and organizations, you will see more of the rainbow reflected in Imperial Court events. Even here in Fresno, you will see that Fresno's Imperial Court chapter has a majority involvement of people of color that are LGBTQ. Now, what has the court done? And this is, I'm sure that many of you remember when the Harvey Milk stamp came out. What you probably don't know, it was the imperial courts that got you that stamp. The imperial courts, think about it. Jose, before she passed, she crowned me her successor. And that's where I get the Queen of the Americans. And I thought, we're in all these cities, and I was working on the Chapa stamp campaign. And once we got the Chapa stamp campaign, I started researching and saw that there were no stamps in honor of any LGBTQ hero. So I announced we're going to have a national letter writing campaign to the, it's called the National Stamp Commission. And everyone laughed at the national organization, oh no, you know, that. But I know one thing, you should always remember this when you do, there's emails and all that, but nothing speaks louder than a handwritten letter. And so for 6 years, the imperial courts, including Fresno, wrote hundreds of letters to the staff. And we also got everyone from the mayor of Louisville and Kentucky to the mayor of thing, and people go, how did you get them? Well, maybe these queens were their hairdressers or their florists. And they got to write the letters. And so I remember for Bill and Stuart Bill, his nephew said, call me, he said, call. I go, what? They go, they're going to get you off the staff, and it's going to be on me like the White House. And a couple days later, they also called me. We were invited to the White House on the unveiling of the Harvey Milk stamp. Well, because I think every community does need heroes and do need role models. So I said, when Don't Ask When I was lifted, I called the HRC and honors and I said, would you join us? We're going to have a letter writing campaign to the Secretary of Navy. I started looking up. Yes, you would think the person that gets to choose the name of every ship in the Navy, you would think, I thought it was Congress, or maybe the Senate, or the President. It's one person, the Secretary of Navy, gets to name all the ships. So it was under Obama, I said, let's start writing letters to the Secretary of Navy. So we did, and the court, including Fresno, 5, 6, 7 years, I think it took, and I get a call from Stuart, you crazy queens have done it again. And I go, well, what have we done? They go, the Secretary of the Navy called me, and they are going to announce the ship named after Harvey Milk. Now, there were 4 ships. There was the Harvey, they announced it at one time. The Harvey Milk, USS Harvey Milk, the UNS John Lewis, the USS Robert Kennedy, and Thurman Marshall. One of the Chief Justice of the California Supreme Court. But all that headlines were about Harvey, and I thought, my goodness, Robert Kennedy. But Robert Kennedy, the John Lewis, and I had the honor of being invited to John Lewis's the dedication of the ship. And where's that young man? So I brought all of you. Where's the young man that was here with? Oh, is he way back there? Oh, why don't you come on? And I brought you all, and you're going to be the first ones that have buttons that are going to be given on November 6th, next month. The USS Harvey Milk is going to be dedicated in San Diego. And this was accomplished by courts all across the nation. And here's 2 interesting facts. The public relations person for the post office and also for the Navy said these were the biggest letter writing campaigns they have gotten ever in the last decades for a stamp and a ship. So what does that tell you? That tells you that writing letters and stuff still has impact, and that our voices still can be heard. If you would, everyone said, you're crazy. But I want to make it very clear. A lot of these accomplishments, they may be my idea, but an idea where there are not people that believe in that idea. So it is a we situation. And I will be always grateful for the chapters of the courts who believe in my campaign, our campaign to get a stamp and a ship made back. Yeah, you pass it on there. So you need to get it before the Congress, members of Congress, and we just got this week, and I thought you might like to have a thing. So this November 6th is going to be quite a celebration in San Diego. But we also have a campaign going on to get a bipartisan stamp, that's looking pretty good, and also a stamp in honor of 3 drag queens, and that is Jose Rivera and Marsha P. Johnson. So I'm going to show you, these are the stamps that are proposed. This is one of Sylvia Rivera. She was Puerto Rican, drag queen at Stonewall. This is Marsha P. Johnson. She did love her flowers. And then this is Jose, the founder of our system in 1961. Ran for public office and paved the way for Tammy Baldwin and Harvey Milk and everyone else. So the good news is we've got news that this is going to happen in the next 4 years, and this the administration that we now have. The future of the LGBT. Where do we go from here? First of all, the Victory Fund. There are now, if you imagine, 900. It started with Jose in 1961. Harvey Milk became the first, Aline Noble became the first lesbian. There are now 900 elected LGBT officials, from U.S. Senator to members of Congress to governors. Oregon, I believe, Oregon and Washington just elected a lesbian governor. Colorado has a gay governor, a gay male governor. And so the empowerment of our community representation is becoming a reality. And as Harvey Milk always said, if we're not at the political table, we're on the menu. So it is very important to get involved. I think the future of our state, they call this the Golden State. Well, I'm telling you, the Golden State is turning brown. The fastest growing populations are the Latino, Asian Pacific Islander. And those communities are now, along with the African American community, the majority. I wish we would vote in the numbers that we could, because I think New Mexico and Arizona and others would definitely be in better hands, as it were. But the future, I believe, of the movement and the LGBT movement is in coalition. When a hate crime is committed against one of us, it should be committed against all of us. Just like Anita Bryant awoken a sleeping giant, the attacks on the Asian Pacific Islander community has woken another sleeping giant. I've had the pleasure of attending rallies and organizations of Asian Pacific Islanders, and let me tell you, they are organized, and they are becoming visible. Sometimes it's the act of oppression that wake people up. But in attending these rallies, and also Black Lives Matter and so forth, I see that there isn't enough coalitions that should be supported. We should be as outraged as a transgender person attacked a hate crime or an LGBT person. We should be just as outraged when the attack is on African American or Asian Pacific Islander. We should be appalled by the Supreme Court's not taking a stand concerning the Texas and the women's right. Because let me tell you, first they will come, and they are, after a woman's right, and do not think already 2 Supreme Court justices have made it very clear that we should look at gay marriage once again. We're all in this together. Those that are anti-female rights, those that are anti Asian Pacific Islander and the undocumented are the same enemies. They hate all of us and are working against us. So it is so ridiculous to me that people do not understand this and communities don't start working together and building stronger coalitions. I believe that people are working on that, and I hope that we do, but let us not forget that around 74 million Americans voted for the other candidate for president. More so than Obama got when he was elected. I think that we realize, sadly to say, the last administration made racism, homophobia to be comfortable, and for people to come out and express. Usually they would hide it, but now some are very proud that they have these feelings. So what is my message to you? It's the ballot box. Every civil rights is politics. And the truth of the matter is, this midterm elections will say where America is going. Is it going forward or is it going backwards? And I believe that this will be, and we said it last time, it was one of the most important elections. We've got to get everyone registered to vote. And we've got to turn out and vote like we did last time. Think about it. Look at the legislations, and there are now over 30 states that have anti-LGBTQ civil rights bills. There are states that are oppressing the votes of the African American communities. This is very alarming and should be. And that's why we've got to take a stand and fight this together. I want to close by saying that, AIDS was probably the darkest times, I think, of many of our lives. But there was a rainbow. The first early years of AIDS, the gay community only had itself. And the drag queens every week in the bars, people don't understand what gay bars are. Gay bars are what churches are for the black community. A safe haven, a place to meet, greet, and organize. And the truth of the matter is, AIDS absolutely did great damage to our communities. But it also, again, awoke that we had to get involved politically. And AIDS is still here. But our community went through it. I recall Los Angeles Times did an interview with me, and I said, which was true, during that time, going to funerals and memorials weekly became a way of life for us. But it also prepared us for this epidemic that we're going through now. But AIDS has no borders, and hate has no borders for us today. We've got to organize and support each other. So I think God has blessed me to be, I think, of a witness to the last 50 years. And to be able to speak to all of you and tell this history and this story, because we're losing the Stonewall generation and they're going with these stories. So my challenge to all of you, especially you people of color, is to sit down with your elders and your seniors and ask them about how it was in the 1950s and 60s. Because everyone's journey is different, but they will be so happy to tell you we don't learn something. Because what the rights of the LGBT community we have now, when I speak to them and say, oh, they would arrest you for dancing with each other, and that was considered perversion and a gross disrespect to the public image, and all these crazy charges. More people lost their life because of suicides. Because they would walk into a bar in the 60s and 70s, rated, arrest you for lewd conduct, you go to court the next day, and they dismissed it. But that record was still there. So, They always say that we won't go into the past, and we're not going to repeat the past. Well, there's Vietnam and there's Afghanistan. And to me, that's repeating history. It should never have happened, and yet it did. I always hoped there would be a third party someday in this country that would bring together these coalitions. Hopefully it will happen in my lifetime, I don't know. But all of you have an obligation to change the world, make it better than what it is today. And also to look around you and see who's missing and be concerned about other things that are happening to other communities. Because they will pick us one by one. So, I wish you the very best. I'm very honored to be here. Like I said, I've been through drugs, I've been through street life, and many times I go, why have I survived from AIDS, epidemic, anything? And I believe that it's to tell the stories as our proud Native Americans have had that tradition. So thank you for letting me tell you my story. Thank you, God bless you all. So, are there any questions? I wear a size 48 woman dress.
I think there was one back there.
Yes. Yes.
I was wondering what the conversation was like with Jose when you were asked to become Queen Mother of the Americas.
Pardon?
I was wondering what the conversation with Jose was like when she asked you to become Queen Mother of the Americas.
Oh, so you gotta remember, Jose founded this organization, was 90-some years old, and called me and said, Jose was there. I'm coming down to San Diego and I'm talking to you. I'm flying here, you're gonna meet me at the airport, and I have something to tell you. And I go, okay. So she flew down, and we were there for close. And she said, I have about 5 years to live. My doctor told me, and so I have to think about the court system, this 70, chapter situation, and who will lead it. So I immediately thought there was this Empress, God bless her son, and very articulate Asian Pacific Islander in San Francisco. Her name was Remy. Very intelligent. That was Jose's like executive secretary, articulate. So I go, Remy, you came here to tell me that Remy, because I was president of Jose's council, and she goes, you. And I said, well, who are you going to name? And she said, you. And I go, oh, no. I go, and because even to this day, I belong to all kinds of, as you heard, national, and they would go, why are you still involved with that dragon organization? I go, because I started with that dragon organization. And I don't forget where I come from. So she said, well, you have the political thing, you will take it to the next level. And I hope I've done her all right. It was controversial. Next year will be the 50th anniversary of her passing on the position and crowning me as the Queen Mother. It's always interesting because San Diego was a Republican town. I've served, can you imagine? I've served and advised 8 mayors of San Diego, 5 Republicans, 3 Democrats. And San Diego was fortunate because the 5 Republicans were pretty progressive on social issues wise. And now, our current mayor, which I'm so excited about, I actually is like a son. And they gave me, if you see polls, there's a lot of choose from this polls. And Todd Gloria was this young lady, half Filipino and half Puerto Rican. And also Native American. He was president of our Senate. He was walking through Ralph's supermarket. And I said, come here, God. He goes, what? I go, you're going to run for city council. He goes, well, the establishment has already picked someone. And if you remember about Harvey Milk, the establishment actually ran Stokes, another gay opponent against Harvey, because he thought Harvey was too radical. And so the Democratic Party did endorse Gloria for city council. The gay Democratic Party endorsed Democratic congressman, but I knew that Todd, it said, oh, say, remember the Obama Romney, who would you like to have a beer with? You know, in Todd's case, you had a pig. Very outgoing, and he won. And then became majority whip of the state assembly. And last year, he got elected as our first mayor of color in San Diego and our first state mayor. So obviously, I'm very excited about that. And he's doing a good job. I think he has a bright future ahead of him. You all need to, I understand you haven't had a mayor of color here in Fresno. Is that correct? Yes, so you need to get that, or get it to reflect this community more so. But I know it's difficult. Us Latinos, though, it drives me up the law. Like I said, we could control it. The Latinos voted in the way that they could and should. Arizona, Texas, look at Texas, what we go through there, and other states would be quite different. So I'm a big advocate of registered people to vote. Yes?
So how would you suggest localizing communities of color to vote, besides just trying to get them registered, but actually get them out to the polls?
That's a very good question. And I'll tell you a quick story. The mayor appointed me to the Human Relations Commission decades ago, and I went there, and people don't get to know other people's cultures, and really we